One of the objectives of the Society for Vascular Ultrasound's Legacy Committee is to recognize the people and the science who initiated many ideas and concepts of non-invasive vascular testing and the impact their contributions made over the years in the profession of vascular technology. The contributions from these individuals, which were from some of the most talented scientists of our time, have made great strides in the advancement of non-invasive diagnostic vascular testing. One of the leading scientists in the evolution of vascular technology was Kirk Beach. Kirk began his education at the University of Washington in Seattle, receiving his undergraduate degree in electrical engineering. From there, he pursued his master's and doctorate degrees in chemical engineering at the University of California at Berkeley. Soon after, Kirk had an interest in continuing his education and surprisingly found his way to medical school back in Seattle at the University of Washington, although he never intended to practice medicine.
Well, Kirk, so when you were in high school, what did you think you were going to be doing when you were grown up?
Working for the telephone company, making new telephones, maybe a video telephone.
Oh,
so here we are on a video telephone.
That's right. So your undergraduate degree is in
Electrical engineering.
And you got that from?
University of Washington.
Right. And your master's?
Well, I got interested in neurology as a communication system, and I thought that was electrochemical. So I went to study electrochemical engineering at Berkeley.
Okay. And then
I stayed there for my PhD and looked at how ions move toward surfaces.
Okay. And after that, I think you did work for a while as a research person. And what happened?
I spent a year in Boston at the Harvard Biophysical Laboratory looking at active transported membranes, transport of ions. And that's where I kept hearing about the proximal tubule of the kidney, whatever that is, and thought, I'm going to be confused about these things if I decide to work in biological areas or medical areas.
Well, I think eventually what you decided was that you were going to need more education. How did that work out?
Well, I applied to medical school thinking I would be rejected, but I was foiled and got accepted at the University of Washington. And so I had an exciting 4 years back here in Seattle.
So did you plan to practice medicine when you started medical school?
No, practicing medicine requires that you be able to recognize things, like recognize when people are sick and that sort of thing. And I'm just not very good at that.
I see. So what was your goal in going to medical school?
Well, just to learn more about the issues that need more knowledge, I guess. And by that time, the University of Washington had a program in bioengineering. And so I'd hoped to become associated with that.
As Kirk was approaching graduation from medical school in 1976, he found himself interested in research alternatives as opposed to internship. At this time, Kirk met Gene Strandis by happenstance in a hallway.
You said in your assessment that you had a chance meeting with Gene Strandis in a hallway. And I think that the younger people who unfortunately never knew Gene would love to hear a little bit more about how that really came about, because, I mean, to me, that changed everything.
Well, it certainly did. Strandis had originally planned to do gastrointestinal surgery, And instead, he was assigned to the job of being a vascular surgeon. And so he got an interest in bioengineering because he figured that this was fluid flow through tubes and involved calculus and that sort of thing, and he better learn something about it. And that's how he got involved with non-invasive diagnostic methods and using electronics and so on, because that's what bioengineering had done to a great extent. So, he had to recreate his laboratory in about 1976. He had just one person working for him, and that was Dick Krugmeyer. And actually a guy named David Bailey suggested that I go talk to him about what I was going to do. Bailey was interested actually in bone growth and interested in the periosteal membrane. And that's how I met him, because I was fiddling around with membranes and ion transport through membranes.
So how did you meet Strandus? That was
I walked down the right hallway and there he was.
Wow.
And I went into his office and we talked for about 5 minutes. And he said, well, he'd applied for this research grant, and if he got the funding, that he would hire me to do the work.
And what year was that?
1976.
And for the next 25 years, Dr. Strandus, Kirk, and the team at the University of Washington worked together on many research studies and projects that lay the foundation of knowledge and principles of vascular technology that is still practiced today worldwide. Their early work involved deciphering and analyzing, for the first time, spectral Doppler waveforms and arterial pressures, and comparing them to multiple angiographic findings, thus figuring out the rules of diagnosing vascular disease non-invasively. Although the initial methods of testing were useful, the team at the University of Washington agreed that to objectively assess the progression of disease, new methods of non-invasive measurement were required, and it was believed that to determine the disease status into precise classifications, progression of disease could be detected over time. Kirk spent his 25-year career as part of the University of Washington's vascular surgery team during the most developmental years of vascular technology. His extensive research and teaching contributed to classifying parameters of disease and disease progression. A few of his many publications included color flow mapping and hemodynamics, systolic velocity criterion for diagnosing significant internal carotid artery stenosis, the revolution in non-invasive vascular disease and the progression of vascular disease, the evaluation of velocity and frequency accuracy and ultrasound duplex scanners, the foundations of non-invasive vascular diagnosis, carotid Doppler velocity measurements in anatomic stenosis, and carotid artery intraplaque hemorrhage and stenotic velocity. It is important to recognize Kirk's contributions to the profession of vascular technology because his contributions impact our daily workflow seamlessly. Every time we measure velocities of spectral Doppler waveforms, utilize information obtained in the measurement of pressures from blood flow throughout the body, and utilize this information in diagnosing vascular disease non-invasively and to classify parameters of vascular disease, which allows practitioners to determine the progression of disease and treating patients. The ever-curious Kirk Beach continues to ask questions and seek answers in understanding many physiologic processes, and currently his interests are stroke and brain injury.
What would you say was the most intriguing thing that you ever worked on? Now, I know, because I know you're going to say the last thing you did. Probably. Or maybe the thing you're working on right now, because you're endlessly enthusiastic. So really, looking historically, what would you say was the project that you enjoyed the most, and why?
Well, I enjoyed teaching ultrasound physics and, being involved with the vascular exam and that sort of thing, just as a matter of enjoyment. The most intriguing thing is this business of how the brain moves inside the skull, the tissue Doppler of the brain. When Mark Mooring demonstrated to me almost 30 years ago now that the brain floats, when you tilt your head to the side, the brain floats upward, I thought that was pretty intriguing. I would still like to pursue that. If the brain moves when subjected to changes in orientation and changes in impact, then one opportunity might be to equip people on sports fields with ultrasound transducers on their head so you can watch their brain move as they do boxing or play football, and get some information about how brain injury occurs.
Any advice to give to somebody entering this field today, and based on what you've done in your career, what would that be? Somebody just starting out in the field.
Have a good time. That is, if somebody asks me to do something, I'll say yes.